Hey, this is Will Foxley with CoinDesk. Today we're talking with Josh Cincinnati from the Zcash Foundation. Hey Josh, how you doing?
Great, Will. Thanks for having me.
Just looking at your talk that we just heard downstairs on the Rainbow stage, and pinging off from the last few months, we saw Zcash Foundation and ECC working with each other to come up with a viable solution for the governance fund going forward. What were some things that you learned for the foundation, and what are some things that you would do differently looking back?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest takeaway, it's something I mentioned in the talk, but I wouldn't mind expounding on it now, is the thing that really matters most in any sort of process when you talk about funding public goods, particularly if there's a limited set of potential recipients to those public goods, is to establish legitimacy in the process, and that means that effectively you need to make sure that everyone in the community, the people that use your protocol, are bought into the process that decides these things. And there's this tension, I think, in projects that are decentralized or trying to be decentralized, and then having an official method of reaching a decisive conclusion to a kind of controversial process, and that was something that was difficult for us to, I think, to work through, because we had ideas about how we wanted this process to work, but we had to make sure that we weren't the ones being definitive about it, because one, we don't really have the power to do that on account of the trademark agreement that we have with the ECC, and even without the trademark agreement, users can choose to run different software. So effectively, we were really making suggestions and guides for how we want the process to work, that were then debated and discussed by community members, which emerged into new process forming. I think that established a degree of legitimacy for the process that wouldn't have existed otherwise. But looking back, if we had figured that out as a community before we had gotten to a point where we needed to discuss a controversial decision, we would have been, I think, it would have been a more streamlined decision. So I think that's probably what I would change. But all in all, to be completely honest, I'm really ecstatic about the results. The final zip that is still being slightly negotiated, but should be appearing very soon, is it contains a lot of the best parts of the other earlier proposals that were suggested, and seems like a really good compromise that still enables the ECC to receive continued funding, enables the Zcash Foundation to receive continued funding, but requires both organizations to adhere to pretty strict accountability requirements, and at the same time carves out the largest slice of the dev fund for third parties, people that are outside of the ECC and the foundation. And the method by which those parties is selected is going to be very much a community-driven process. So I'm pretty excited about all of that. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So kind of moving on and looking at the entire ecosystem that partook within this voting structure, you had two parties, Zcash, ECC, along with outside community builders, and miners would probably be the fourth one.
Yes.
Miners we saw didn't partake, which would be interesting as a group that is impacted by why did they not vote?
Yeah, and I can only speculate, yeah, to be clear. I also just to be really clear, there were individual miners that wanted to participate, but because they were all, there may be two or three that had reached out, but they were smaller scale and they contributed to mining pools, and the pool itself, the pool operator, is the one that actually decides how blocks are assembled, and therefore they were the ones that had to signal within the miner signaling mechanism, and they just didn't. My speculation, which is based off of conversations that I've heard others have with some of those pool operators and miners in general, is basically that they didn't want to interfere with a process that to them they hoped would result in an outcome that Zcash would still be supported by the predominant stewards of the protocol that exists today, and new users, and they just didn't. As long as they can still continue to mine profitably, then they're willing to let that process be, because the like short-term selfish game on the mining side would be no dev fund and no money into research and development or to third parties to help develop on Zcash. And while there are certainly like advantages to that model from a protocol ossification standpoint, I think that if I were in the miner shoes, I would imagine that like there's no point in like doing that if it just results in no further research and development and Zcash continuing to pursue its mission to be a private digital cash. So that was what I imagined the thinking would be. Although I'd love, one of the things that we haven't really done as well on the foundation side is we don't really have a lot of connections with miners in the ecosystem, which is good and bad. I think it means they have, they can do whatever they want and have their own independent voice and all that. But it also means that we're somewhat, we're somewhat disconnected from their activity outside of what they do within the confines of the protocol. So it would be nice, I think, to establish those and maybe have a clearer line with them for any future controversial decisions.
Circling back to Zcash Foundation and then a recent blog post that you put up, looking back at 2019 and then looking forward to 2020,
Sure.
What are some highlights from that blog posting and what you've seen from reactions to that blog?
Yeah, well, I think most of the reactions continue to be positive toward the degree of transparency that the foundation displays. I think that there's certainly disappointment. One of the biggest disappointing pieces, despite that transparency, we had really fully expected to have an independent, consensus-compatible node that was owned and so the development process was owned by the foundation, and that people could use to run software independent from the ECC that still connects to the Zcash network, and we missed on that goal. And I think we missed for the right reasons, because we recognized that the node software that had been delivered as a result of our partnership with Parity was not going to set us up for future development, and given that we had established an internal engineering team that was in my view, world-class and competent enough to make those decisions, I definitely felt better from a foundation perspective, taking longer to deliver that product, but product is maybe the wrong word, but to deliver that software project, but doing it the right way that would encourage more outside development, that would make maintenance easier, and honestly make like the lives of our engineers better, to have a better piece of software to get them there. So I think that was, that was a disappointment that we highlighted in that blog post, but one that had good reason for not being a potential success for us. Otherwise, like I feel really good about the growth that the foundation had last year. We went from 3 employees to 7. And all that hiring was done on the tech side. We now have that world-class engineering team that is executing on a really ambitious roadmap that covers that independent consensus-compatible node, but also covers wallets and usability, hardware wallet support, eventually mobile wallet support, threshold signatures to enable multi-signature addresses and transactions on shielded Zcash, and then we have big goals for network privacy research and development, which is sort of not what you call an Achilles heel necessarily, but certainly something that hasn't been focused on as much in Zcash. So yeah, altogether I think we had some misses, but we had some pretty big successes in terms of growing the team, and of course shepherding the dev fund process and providing guidance for the community took up a lot of our focus, but in a way that led to, I think, a very positive outcome.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it, Josh.
Yeah, of course, Will. It was my pleasure. Yeah.